Hi everybody, it's Anne. Thanks for joining me on Art on the Creek. We're in my home studio here in Parker, Colorado, and I have pulled out the drawer to my easel because I want to talk to you about something in here. I've already done a review on these Art Philosophy gouache paints, and here's my Holbein. I have a review on some Holbein gouache as well. But what I really want to talk to you about today are these guys, these 6 friends right here. They are Jack Richeson Casein paints. They are so wonderful. Oh my gosh, casein is the protein that's found in milk. So these might be called, you may have heard of milk paint. They've got a huge history. In fact, it goes back to ancient times, and we're going to learn all about that. Plus, if you remember the slogan, milk, it does a body good. Well, let's find out why casein does a painting good. Are you ready? Let's go get to it. Well, here we go. Jack Richeson Casein. Now, there may be other brands out there, but this happens to be the one that I have. And I thought we could just swatch them out here. And while I'm swatching, I'll talk to you about them a little. First of all of these are rated light fastness 1. So that is, that's really good to know. The brush that you should use on these are that first one I pulled out. It is Taclon or nylon filament. Save these good watercolor brushes for your watercolor. They hold too much water. They're difficult to clean with the casein in it. It's just better to use either a nylon or a Taclon brush. So you want something like this. If you have the Princeton Snap, those are really good. The Blick Master Stroke, or any of these golden Taclon. Anything that says golden Taclon on it is pretty much perfect for casein. Also for gouache, actually, I really like those for that as well. So casein is, if I understand it correctly, the binder that's used is why it's called casein. Casein is a milk protein. And that is the binder that's used to make casein paints. And when you thin this down, you can use a medium. You can actually buy a Casein Emulsion and thin it down to get washes without reducing the intensity of the pigment. So you can thin it down with a certain ratio, and then you'll be able to have your same strength of pigment. What I'm going to show you here today on these swatches, though, is what they are like when you water them down. Now, these are unlike gouache in that you will be able to paint over them without disturbing them. So that's why I like using casein for underlayers. So as I speed up this swatch here, you'll see I kind of have a weird palette, but if you're thinking of using it for underlayers, I think it kind of makes sense. All right, so going left to right here, I have a Permasol Blue, which is a PB15 and a PW6. Next, we've got the Cadmium Red Pale, which really reads as a nice rich orange. It's very nice. It's a PR108. And you'll notice that when I water these down, it does get a little bit streaky. So if I were to use that emulsion, that would alleviate that problem. Yellow Ochre, PY42 and a PY43. None of these are very opaque. Burnt Sienna, PR102. I really love this Burnt Sienna. I think it's really quite nice. And then we have the Raw Umber, which is a PBR7. And then finally, this one here is Payne's Gray. It's a PB29 and a PBK7, but I don't think it's very gray at all. I think if you were to mix a touch of the Burnt Sienna or Raw Umber with it, you'd be better off. But as Payne's Gray goes, this is not gray. I don't know. I don't like the way they named it, but that's okay. I can see why they did name it that because it's got the PBK7 in there. But it's a very, very nice pigment and easy to use. Now, this is obviously not a real primary set, and the colors are all kind of, they kind of lend a little bit warm. So I got these with the intention of using them for underpaintings, which is just what we're going to do today. We'll get into the importance of an underpainting here in just a moment, but I want to show you first of all what some mixes look like with this and just kind of what it would be like. I've never done an entire painting with casein. You certainly can, but I just want to show you what some of these mixes look like. So right now I've got the Payne's Gray because it's such a nice deep dark blue and it does have that PB29 in it. And I'm going to mix it with the Burnt Sienna, and let's just see what kind of a gray black we can get here. I'm just using my brush to mix. I have palette knives, but I thought for this today, I will just show you by mixing right here with my brush. You can use this full strength as I'm doing now, or I'm going to dip in a little bit of water here and thin it out for you. And again, remember that this streaky look is because I'm using the water to thin it out. And if you did want to create that thinner emulsion of the paint, you certainly could, but you would need to buy the medium. Okay, let's do another mix real quick here. This time, let's use that Payne's Gray once again. And I think what I'd like to pull in this time is the raw umber. Now this is a PBR7, but obviously it's been treated a little bit differently. It's definitely more on the burnt umber side, or excuse me, the raw umber side than it is on the burnt sienna. So we're going to see what this mix looks like when it's all together. Because when you mix these blues and browns, or blues and reddish browns, you can really get some beautiful grays, blacks, any kind of dark. I need a little bit more of the burnt umber here. I think I had some binder separation coming out from that tube there. And if that ever happens to you when you open a tube of watercolor gouache and you see like this clear fluid on the top, that's binder separation. And all you have to do is take the back end of your paintbrush and just kind of stick it in the tube and poke it around in there a little bit, and that will help you to mix that around. You can see I did this one much more thin, but I wanted to see what that gray looked like, and it definitely does have different tones to it. I don't know how well it's showing up here on camera, but it really looks to me that it's more of a warm gray. The one on the left is a bit cooler, and the one on the right is more warm. That certainly could be the way I mixed it, but I'm having fun playing with these mixes. So let's just put out a few more colors here. I've got the yellow ochre there on the top right, and then on the bottom left, I have the yellow ochre and that the cadmium red pale. So, oh, and let's use some of that other blue. This is the Permasol blue, which is really kind of like a phthalo blue. So when you mix the yellow ochre with this, it gets a beautiful fall color, which is really nice. This would be a really great underpainting. I would add maybe just a touch of blue to it, or a little bit of the burnt sienna, but I'm going to tap in just a little bit of that raw umber to see if I can bring this over to a whiskey toned, which would also make a lovely underpainting. These pigments are incredibly intense. I really love them. And there you go. We sure can. Underpaintings are so important because whenever you're painting anything, not so much in watercolor, but when you're working pastels, oils, acrylic, gouache, anything like that, the underpainting, I'm pausing because I'm trying to think of an instance where this might be true in watercolor, but I've never done an underpainting with watercolor. So you could certainly do watercolor over these Casein items, but personally, I've just never done it. I've always just used gouache over it and left it at that. But at any rate, I'm so sorry. Back to the underpainting. The reason that you would do one is whenever you're painting over that on a white canvas, little bits of that white are going to show through. You can increase the depth and the richness of value in anything you paint over an underpainting, because those colors are still going to come through. I'm mixing one of the blues there. I believe that's the Permasol blues, and I'm mixing with the yellow ochre so that you can see how rich these greens get. And in a minute here, I'm going to paint over it so you can kind of see they're still a little bit transparent, these colors. And that's important too, because remember, when you're painting on an underpainting, like here with this yellow ochre, you can still see the other colors underneath it. So it does give your painting a little bit more life, a little bit more depth, just a little bit more realistic tendencies, I guess would be the way to phrase it. When we see color in our world, we see it in layers and different depths in whatever it is we're looking at. Those reflection points come from different points in space. And when you can tone your canvas or whatever it is you're working on, a board, a paper, when you tone that to give yourself an underpainting, what you're doing is you're creating another dimension in your work. So don't feel that you have to run out and do this. This is just some new thing that you could try if you haven't tried it yet. I really enjoy using Casein for my underpaintings, and I do it. I don't do it often enough, but I am very excited because one of you asked for more information about Casein. So I'm very happy to oblige, and I'm just having a blast here playing with this. It dries a very velvety matte finish. It's a really cool paint. Historically, it's got a really neat story behind it. Its origin story, if you will. This really is an origin story because it is kind of a superhero. This paint is really pretty cool. So, okay, here is a brief history of milk paint. So casein is the protein found in milk. And I am reading this to you from a website that I found, and I will link to it in the description because it's already stated so well here that I felt like I'll just share this with you. There is evidence that milk paint has dated back 30,000 years in cave paintings in Australia and was also found in King Tutankhamun's tomb. The paint was commonly used to aid creative self-expression, as we still do today, as well as provide a protective coating on furniture and porous surfaces. And this is what is so neat, because this is why I like using casein for an underpainting. What you can do with casein, you cannot do with, say, gouache. So let me explain that. Gouache, as many of you know, is a matte finish, water-based. It's like opaque watercolor in a way. Casein is water soluble. However, when it dries, it won't move. And I mean, it's not as stable as, say, acrylic, but you can definitely use this as an underpainting, paint with a wet wash over it and not disturb that underpainting. So this is why you can create some really dynamic paintings here. And you can see I'm mixing right now. I'm using the casein to mix, trying to see what kind of skin tones I can get out of this. And yeah, if I had, you know, a better palette. I don't really have a palette that's designed for mixing too much, but what I've got in my selection of colors here is enough that if I were to thin that out, I could probably, or to add a little bit more dark tones, I could probably get a full range of complexion. If you did want to get some casein to mix and paint portraiture with it, what I would suggest that you get is your basic primary that I always recommend. A warm and a cool red, a warm and a cool yellow, and a warm and a cool blue. And with this type of paint, you could also get a white and a black, and that will help you with mixing. I would also probably add just a couple of convenience colors. Definitely this burnt sienna and a raw umber. And if you wanted some more convenience colors, I really do like a yellow ochre, maybe a green and a purple, whatever you would use to your liking. You can see how velvety smooth they dry. I mean, it really is nice. I particularly like the blues, but those earth tones, the yellow ochres, I use those too, the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna. Here is something I painted last night. Now, I will cut in here with a photo that I will show you what it looks like when it's wet. But what I did was I put the yellow ochre on first, and then I dotted the burnt sienna in the corners, and just with a wet brush kind of blended it like that. And this is what I'm left with, kind of this buckskin looking paper that I'm going to paint on today. Here is what it looked like when it was wet. You can see it's much more dark and rich, and it does dry that velvety smooth finish. So it's really interesting to play with this to kind of see how much depth you want in your underpainting, because you might need to go back in and use another coat. Here is what I'm going to paint on top of it today. This is going to be a really interesting kind of primitive style. This is a photo I took last year on a hike right near our house on the trails. It's a bee on a thistle. I really like how that pinky purple is going to stand out against this gold, and any spaces left between then, that gold that's peeking through is really going to provide some visual tension and interest. So our eyes will be able to discern those edges a little more sharply. And we're going to have some more interest for our brains when these colors bounce back and hit our retina. And this is really going to be quite a lot of fun, I hope. So I am using a Stabilo All Pencil to draw on here. And not sure that I made the best choice on this one. I could have used white, and that would probably be better. The reason for that is these Stabilo All Pencils, I really love them, and they are water soluble. But in this case, when I went over them with some of the gouache colors that I was using, it really just kind of made them very shady with a black, a very flat shaded look that I really didn't want. So I'm just kind of drawing a circle for the flower and, you know, an oval for the bee, a couple of trapezoid type shapes for the wings. I'm not really being too detailed here. And then we'll get right to painting. I'm going to use up this Art Philosophy gouache. It is decent gouache. I have a review on it, and I'll put a little card up here in the corner so that you can go check that out if you want to. The gouache is decent. You can see how well it covers this underpainting, and I'm using just mixes of, think it's a mauve or mauve, and some of the white. Now the white I'm using is, you can see it there off to the left, the G796. That is Holbein, and it is, I want to say, titanium white. So let's see, I've got it right here. Permanent white, sorry. It is a permanent white. And I like having a very large tube of gouache, because when you're working with gouache as an opaque medium or acrylic or oils, you artists out there will know this, that you use a lot of white. You just go through it a lot because you use it to create different value ranges of your colors. So the first red I put down there was a vermilion, and then I went on to the crimson because I wanted to keep this in the cool range. I just grabbed the wrong tube of paint there. So I'm trying to get the little fronds of the thistle to come out here. And like I said, this part is all gouache. I will get to a point where I'm going to go ahead and mix in some of the casein. That's another thing that's kind of fun about it. You can mix this with gouache. You can do quite a bit of things. And I think I haven't really tried mixing it with gouache as far as then testing that to see if that's going to make it more stable. But you certainly could if you had, let's say you were painting gouache and you did a layer over something in casein, and you wanted to then paint on top of that, but you didn't want that particular layer to move, then I would say that you'd probably be just fine, because the king of using casein for backgrounds in my mind is James Gurney, and I know I've linked to his channel before, and he is a wealth of information for casein and all things gouache. So if you ever need to know much more than I'm telling you here, I definitely recommend checking out James Gurney. The bee that I'm working on here, I'm just kind of putting some of that yellow down because I am going to go in with colored pencil later. That's another thing that's really fun about this casein. It can handle just about any media on top of it, and you won't have any trouble at all. You could pastel on top of it, colored pencil, just about anything. Graphite's a little bit challenging, and that could just be this color that I've chosen, but that's why I was using the Stabilo all pencil to paint in from the beginning, because the graphite wasn't really showing up at all. So here's where I'm going back into this palette here with the earthy colors on it. This is my casein palette, and I've got a little bit of the Art Philosophy gouache there, the lemon yellow, to kind of mix in with that so I can have some varying levels of green. I am just going in here fast and furious with this angle brush. It's a 3/8 inch angle brush, and I'm just creating that thicket of leaves that is around the thistle. It almost looks like ivy, but we don't have any ivy around here, so I don't know what those plants were surrounding this thistle. It wasn't taken in somebody's manicured lawn. It was out in where wildflowers are, so I don't really know what the situation was with that, but I do like the variance of greens. So like I said, this is just really kind of primitive, kind of loose, expressive. I wanted to get the different variants of shading in there so that you could see which direction the thistle was pointing. And I think that was very, very easy to do, and pretty achievable. Now here I'm going in with colored pencils, as I mentioned before, and I'm just going to go in and shade a little bit on the bee. I think I've got a deco yellow, and then I'll go in with yellow ochre and burnt sienna, and then I've got a very light blue that I used on the wings. So let me zoom ahead to that part, and I will get to where we're finishing up the flower itself. Casein is really known for its durability. Like I mentioned, you've seen where they unearth tombs and ancient caves. Those paintings on the walls and probably on the pottery, they use that casein, that's a milk-based paint, to create those pigments. So it does dry to that matte finish, and the big benefit to that for graphic designers is that it's excellent for reproduction, because you're not going to get any luminescent things bouncing back from you on your scanner or in your printing. There's some other great surfaces you can use. This is Arches 100% cotton watercolor paper. You can also use a board, an art board. Those are really, really nice. Thin it down and make an underpainting with it. Fabulous. And you'll be able to get your values organized that way, or rather decide where you're headed with your values, like I did here with this gold. I was able to have that shining through in little bits and pieces, and you'll be able to see that here when we take the tape off. Reds, oranges, and yellows do shift quite a bit after drying, so keep that in mind. And that's not talking about the light fastness. Now that's talking about color shift, which is what I showed you when the underpainting that I did was wet versus when it was dry. You could see that big shift there. Let's see, what else can I tell you? If you wanted to make a color lighter, you could add water to it, as I did in the swatching, or you can add the powdered pigment to it to make it more intense. So see, you really have a lot of leeway with this. I'm going to give you a huge heads up. The thing that surprised me that nobody seems to talk about, these smell like pine sol. It's a faint smell. It's not bad. I don't feel as though I need to open a window, but Casein does have an odor to it. And when you clean it up, you're going to want to use a solution of 1 to 9 ammonia. So remember that if you're working out of your bathroom sink or your kitchen sink, be prepared to clean up any splashes or stains, because you don't want to not be able to get that out. There's all kinds of information on the Jack Richeson website, and I will link to that. They have a whole page devoted to casein use, and I'm going to link to that because, once again, I feel like they have done the excellent research and it's all spelled out for you. So I will be your bridge. I will provide the link for you to go research that if this is something you decide that you want to do. I'll also link to the Casein color chart because it's amazing. They have 37 colors right now when I'm recording this on July of 2023. And what I love about their color chart is it shows the mass tone, 100% color, and it also shows the 50-50 color and white, and then a gradient from 95 to 5%. So you can do a little bit of a watercolor wash effect with these too, which is just really fun. And that's kind of what I was doing in the swatches. I didn't do it very neatly or very cleanly, but I wanted to give you the general idea, the general gist of how this is going to work. So you can see on watercolor paper here, you can see that yellow poking through. You can see that luminescence coming in between the leaves, and I really hope that you can see how it gives your painting a little bit more depth of field. And as I'm figuring out how I want to arrange this for a thumbnail shot, you can see how the palettes are working out. These little palettes are actually appetizer trays from Amazon, and I got 3 of them for $11. That's all you need is something that's white ceramic. You can just go to the hardware store and buy a ceramic tile if that's what you want. I wanted something with a little bit of a lip to it. And if I were to go out and get a ceramic palette at an art store, these sizes, I'd be spending a lot more money. So keep that in mind. Think outside the box. Don't always look in the art store for art supplies because you can find things just about everywhere. If you do decide to start playing with Casein, and I hope you do, once again, you're going to want the Taklon brushes, and I really recommend you get some of this. It's a brush cleaner and preservative by the Masters brand, rather. It's absolutely the best brush cleaner there is. It works on wet oil paint, on dry oil paint, on watercolor, acrylic, and stains, and it really keeps your brushes lasting very, very long. And Taklon is such a great fiber to use for these opaque water-based medium. Usually I would be doing this at the sink, but I just wanted to show you how basically how this works. You just get the soap wet, massage it in, and then rinse it off, and there you go. You've got a really clean brush. So no problem whatsoever. Just get yourself a few supplies. Using a board with the Casein would be a lot of fun. But as long as you have that brush cleaner and everything with your Taklon brushes, you can create things like this with these really expressive brush strokes, mixing the Casein with the gouache. Really have a lot of fun with it. As these slow motion pans go across the painting that we did today, I hope you can see that underpainting peeking through. And it really does give almost a backlit impression in some places. Now, if you use a different color underpainting, you'll get a different effect. But that's something I would definitely encourage you to continue to play with. Play with your underpaintings, play with some Casein, try something new. Make sure you're prepared to clean up, and these palettes, my ceramic palettes, just washed up with water. So thank you so much, guys. We'll see you next time. Have a really nice day and enjoy discovering Casein. See you later. Bye now.